I took some self-development courses, and one of the things I discovered that's really shocked me and was a huge had a huge impact on how my life, how living my life was afterwards, was this is not the life I'm supposed to be in. I'm supposed to be over there. And so in holding on to that, I was missing the life I was in because I kept sort of stubbornly saying I should be over in this other. And once I shifted to this moment, this is accept this moment as it is, this one, like literally kind of a meditation sort of a thing, like breathing in and out. And all of a sudden, possibilities started to pop up for me that had been there all the time, but I had completely missed them. Welcome to the Retirement Solutions for Entrepreneurs show. I'm here today. I have the honor of having Sue Horwitz with us, and she's a certified life transitions and divorce coach. And she works with women, I love this, so they can thrive in every transition life has in store for them. So, hi, Sue.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's going to be a real treat having this conversation. I think our listeners are going to really love what you can share with them. So tell me about this whole life transitions and divorce coach thing, and tell me about it and why it's so important.
Well, for me, I live life in transition and have for many years. And what I've learned about transitions is that the way our society works today, we live more often in transition. I think if we compare our age group to, let's say, our parents, they got married, they maybe worked one job for most of their lives, they had their kids and that was it, they'd stay in their home, maybe they downsized. And the way we live today, it's much different than that. We move more times, we have multiple careers, we're living longer, there are more marriages than there have been in the past. So I really got involved with trying to understand transitions around the time I was divorcing. And that everything sort of collided, and the two topics go hand in hand. Divorce is a pretty sizable transition for most people to go through, especially if it's a gray divorce and you've had a long-term relationship and there's a lot of financial things to consider and friends and family that's all combined and need to be unraveled and all of that. And transition in and of itself is exactly a windy road, the same as divorce. It starts with an ending. There's sadness, confusion, grief, before you can start planning your new beginning. So people think, oh, everything is going to be new and different once the divorce is final. And that's really the beginning of a whole other chapter in where you go. So what I like to do is focus on many of the transitions women go through, leaving corporate jobs, maybe becoming an entrepreneur, having an empty nest, perhaps a divorce, or dealing with changes that have to do with change in health status or caring for someone else. So all of those things are transitions and changes. And what I've learned is that they provide a tremendous opportunity for not only personal growth, but to really
character development, I call it.
Character development, that's right. The wrinkles have been well earned, all of those kinds of things. And, to change things about yourself that you never really thought you could. So
that's really awesome. And as you were talking, you were saying, our parents had a certain life map and ours is not as smooth. There's a lot of, we in our generation are a lot of more transitions. And I'm just thinking, when I think about our kids, it's like, if we think ours is kind of choppy, theirs is like a whole nother level. And so, it's like, so that's a big topic. And and I think that the pace of possible transitions, the pace of transitions in life is accelerating. I mean, it feels like that. But we'll see what happens in the future. So anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, there's people have a lot of beliefs about transitions, and some of them are on target, but then I suspect that there are probably some like sort of widely held myths that are out there. So are there any of those that come to mind for you? And if so, how, what would you say to, I'll say, debunk them?
Well, certainly there are, when a transition is voluntary, it's your choice. One would think it would be a smooth sail. You end something, you start something new, and you go for it. And I can debunk that just based on my own change in businesses. I had owned a business previously for 30 years. It was very different than this business. And making that transition from that business to this business was arduous. There's things you know about, things you don't know about, and there's a lot of personal questioning of oneself, even though I wanted this.
Well, that's actually, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the thing that's been the most challenging for me in some of these major transitions is it challenges my identity. I knew who I was, but it was in the context of
something else,
relationship or that employment or whatever that was. And then when that ends, and depending on how tightly bound I am to it, it can be really a huge, I found for myself, it's a huge challenge to my identity and everything. And all of a sudden, everything just it unravels in a way that I found unexpected. So you're at least for me, you're resonating with that.
Right. No, it's very true. I mean, you make those kinds of changes and you're not aware of the depth at which your identity will change and shift, and parts of it will come easily and other parts won't. For me, for example, being out here and doing public speaking or being on camera is just absolutely terrifying. And, I used to speak in front of people all the time in my other life. So it's
different
just
when you're doing it on your own account, isn't it?
Exactly. And, one of the things that was something I probably had to prove to myself in an involuntary transition, like a divorce. There are amazing gifts to be had when you allow yourself to have them and you are accepting of that change and you make a choice that you're going to live your best life.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry to interject my own thing here, but when I got divorced, it was sort of unexpected, but also I'd worked hard to put things together, and so I took some self-development courses, and one of the things I discovered that's really shocked me and had a huge impact on how living my life was afterwards was, this is not the life I'm supposed to be in. I'm supposed to be over there. And so in holding on to that, I was missing the life I was in because I kept sort of stubbornly saying I should be over in this other. And once I shifted to this moment, accept this moment as it is, this one, like literally kind of a meditation sort of a thing, like breathing in and out. And all of a sudden, possibilities started to pop up for me that had been there all the time, but I had completely missed them.
Yeah.
So sorry to riff, but I mean, it was just so profound for me.
Well, and I think you bring up a really important part of how we can make life a little easier for ourselves in transition or day to day. And that is spending more time in the present. Oh
yeah, that's where we're living anyway.
Right, exactly. And, when there are things you absolutely cannot change in the moment, you just have to be in the moment and change and choose how you want to feel about it in that time. And I think that was probably the greatest bit of personal development that really changed who I am and that I experienced, during and after the divorce. So it was one of those little gifts.
Yes. It also happened to me at a time when I was transitioned out of a job that I loved.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a lot of those.
Yeah.
Same principles apply, right?
Right.
So let me ask you, so we already started on it. So we talked a little. So my question is, what sort of roadblocks do people encounter? And basically what we just talked about covers a variety of those. Are there any other big roadblocks that you want to highlight?
Well, I think in transition, because there's so much unknown, it's very difficult for people to make decisions. And
We want to decide certainly and not make a mistake.
right. And this I really, having gone through it myself and now working with clients in divorce, they ping pong back and forth about so many things, and they should, because it's through that, and then really developing a decision making methodology that I think is super important, where you look at key elements of your decision and you run some tests. And I think you worked in high tech, so this is it's not, what I'm talking about is not much different than the kinds of decisions product managers make about going forth with a product. So it's about widening options and reality testing and all of those things. So I think that's one of the obstacles. And then the other is, we don't rely on our feelings enough to guide us. And
I'll be up here and
right,
there's this pushing that stuff down.
and one of the things that I felt, and I see this also in clients that especially are going through an involuntary change, like losing their job or getting a divorce, for example, is that they're so overwhelmed with certain kinds of emotions that they can't think clearly. And one of the things I like to do is slow down and ask people, what is it you'd like? What way would you like to feel today? How would you like to go through this experience? Where can you give yourself some space? And
so to kind of on that point, one of the things I learned in sort of that self-development work was I call it that which you resist persists.
It's true.
Like I found the more I push it down versus allowing myself to say, okay, this
right.
is what it is, like that. Anyway, and then it builds up.
Right. And so, one of the things these three words have been so much a part of every one of my decisions that have brought me to the happiest time in my life, which I consider to be where you want to be. Yeah. Is during the divorce, I felt so much panic and anxiety and fear. And I was working with a resilience coach at the time. And she said, how would you really like to feel? And I said, I'd like to feel calm, safe, and occasionally I'd like a hint of joy, and those
sprinkling.
Sprinkling of joy in the midst of this. And those words really helped me because.
Well, say them again.
For me, I wanted to be calm, safe, and joyous about everything, something, anything, those were the feelings I wanted to have. And by doing what you suggested, like a mantra, and really evaluating the situations I was in or faced with, like, did the situation make me feel calm or help me be calm? Do I feel safe in this situation? Is there some joy to be had here? And if there wasn't, I was out of there. It helped me choose the professionals I worked with as well. Like if they were of a certain kind of energy that I was like, this is making me feel anxious and I don't want to do as much risk or participate in as much risk as they're talking about, they weren't for me. Yeah. So I think that's a really important way. And now I establish my goals based on how do I feel about achieving this and the way I'm approaching it. And how I feel has a lot to do with how I move forward or decide to take it off the list of to-dos.
Sure. This sort of, I've heard it framed as fire your ex, not your ex spouse, but like fire your fill in the blank
right.
and hire somebody higher. I mean, it just could be like
The higher self.
it could not just somebody that's a professional you're working with, but like even like your relationships, like is this one that's feeding my joy, or is it
Right.
sapping my energy?
Exactly. And I don't think I certainly did not have those skills prior to, my having become a coach and then having gone through the transitions and the divorce training, which were, very specific to those types of
Well, something
situations.
you said underlying that is like really profoundly, this is learnable.
Oh, yeah.
This is learnable. So
Oh,
regardless of where you are, these are learnable, I'll call them skills.
yes.
And so, you don't have to remain stuck and suffering.
Right. And I remember telling a girlfriend of mine that I was not going to allow the divorce to define me. And then I became a divorce coach. And it's because I'm not letting the divorce define me in
Yeah.
some ways. So
I understand. Well, so it's an opportunity to, I mean, it's at least for how it lands for me is an opportunity to give back.
it is. It is. Because so many, I mean, what happens is, especially in this country, women fall below the poverty line. They tend to have, a much more difficult time in terms of social situations, financial situations, especially in older divorces. And I see it a lot. And I get it. And whatever their circumstances are, you can choose to go forward in a much more empowered and knowledgeable way that will make your life far better in the end. So,
Amen.
and
So,
for men too. I
of
shouldn't. I
course, I
mean,
understand you, but you're
we
speaking to women because that's who you would primarily work with.
work with.
But yes, men who are listening, us too.
Yeah, I will not deny your suffering, because I do meet men who are in a great deal of pain post-divorce.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let me ask you this. If you could go back and give your, let's say, 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
so I think one of the most powerful words that I've discovered in the last several years is acceptance. And when we accept things that we cannot change, it opens so many doors for us. And we learn so much by being spiritually generous in that way for ourselves as well. And
So, and I'll say, I found, let me draw from at least for me, something that's made a big difference is drawing a distinction between acceptance and acquiescence. Like acceptance is, for me at least, okay, here's where I am. This is what's going on. This is what is happening. And this is what isn't happening, or whatever. And then from there, instead of just saying, okay, so here I am and I'm stuck and there's nothing I can do about it, that would be acquiescence. It's like, oh,
exactly.
got it. I see where I am. How can I start making choices to move me toward joy?
Joy, or whatever you want to move towards. And that is, and I think when we're young, especially if I think back to my 18-year-old self, acceptance was not in my vocabulary because I would never have acquiesced either to many things. So,
Well, I like that spirit.
yeah. I mean, you were raised, and you probably are pretty much the same, to resist, disagree, fight. That was a big part of, becoming in the time I was growing up. So,
And so I'm kind of inferring that acceptance, like embracing acceptance, could have shifted things for you in ways that, if you look back, would have been more powerful for you. Is that what I'm hearing, or something?
I don't know. I mean, the things that I wouldn't have given in on back in the day when I was 18, I probably still wouldn't give in. They were mainly political or social movements, those kinds of things. But I think in terms of things like how kids look at their parents and, young relationships and, some of the crazy things, expectations we had, or that we had of our parents. It's like we usually don't accept them when we're younger, and so we create issues for ourselves and for our parents. And those would have been things I think my personal relationships would have probably been much better if I could have accepted people for who they are instead of looking at what they weren't in so many ways. And I think that's part of being young. So,
Yeah.
and
So,
not having been married at that point in time, because there's a lot of acceptance that comes with marriage.
yes. So I'll just say, so you talked about transitions are kind of a part of our lives, and that you're living them yourself. So with that kind of backdrop, where do you see yourself in a few years' time?
That's really difficult. And I think that's part of where I am currently. And I think it's very difficult for people right now, certainly in my age bracket, and I have adult children and grandchildren and aging parents and all of those things going on.
Yeah. A lot of moving parts. Yeah.
Right, a lot of moving parts. So about the only thing I feel I can talk about where I'll be is continuing to work on being healthy, continuing to exercise and do the things that fill me up. But beyond that, I really don't know. My business is growing, and I'm not. My 5-year plan is very internally based versus externally based, which is something that I think is one of the beautiful things about going through transitions, is when you create goals based on what's in you instead of what's happening outside and external to you. I think that makes a big difference in how we live our lives.
Wow, that's really helpful. Thanks. So, is there like one question that you wish I'd asked? And if so, how would you have answered it?
Oh my gosh, one question.
And if there's not, that's fine.
My favorite transition?
Okay, sure. So, Sue, what was your favorite transition?
My favorite transition was really relishing living alone after having lived in a frat house because I had a son and a husband for a lot of years.
Oh,
and
I
that,
see. Yeah.
that was
that marriage life was for the sort of a frat house feeling, huh?
it was sort of a frat house environment. And that transition of, being the queen of my four walls and all that was in there was pretty powerful. I mean, and it was lonely, and it was scary, and I had to learn how to use a screwdriver, but that was probably the most joyous transition I've had.
That's really cool. Okay, well, so I think maybe we can kind of bring this to a close, as much as I'd love to continue talking with you.
I know I could talk to you all day.
So, well, we'll work on that.
Okay.
But how can our listeners get in touch with you or support you?
So they can connect with me by email at Sue Horwitz, and that's with one O, HORWITZ, Sue at SueHorwitz.com. They can go to my website and download an ebook that I offer for free, and it's got a change readiness assessment and then the 5 tips to stay calm and in control of any transition that you may be experiencing. Or
very uncomfortable for some of our listeners. Go ahead.
Right. Or and also on my website, if they just want to connect with me, I speak to people. I love talking to people about their future, and it's a complimentary call. And
how long
like
are those conversations?
They're about 45 minutes. So yeah, I love to find out what people are thinking about.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've been speaking with Sue Horwitz, and we've been talking about transitions. I'm Eric Asbeck, and this is the Retirement Solutions for Entrepreneurs show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.